History loves winners. You know, the stories of great achievements by brilliant people. But actually, almost all of these stories are missing their most important detail. To see what that is, we have to start by looking not at history's winners, but at its losers. Their stories are all over the history books, if you know where to look. For example, we take something like The Last Supper and we say to ourselves, this is the work of a genius. But actually, the guy who painted it, Leonardo da Vinci, was kind of a loser. He was born in 1452, just outside of Florence, and it didn't take long for people to realise he could draw. At the age of 14, he gets an apprenticeship with one of the great painters of the time. So far, so good. But Leonardo has a problem. He's got these big ideas for these epic masterpieces he wants to create, but they're so ambitious, he can never get them finished. For example, in 1481, he gets a gig to paint a fresco called the Adoration of the Magi. This is a sketch he made for it, and you can count here 66 people, there's 11 animals, including some kind of horse battle going on over there, and then there's all those stairs. No surprise, he can't get the thing finished. Now, he's a freelancer at this point, and if you're freelance, you'll know that not delivering to a client is bad for business. Not only does he not get paid for his work, now no one will hire him. Which brings us to this unfortunate guy, another one of history's losers maybe. It was grim work, but if you could draw, you could make 40 florins or so painting dead criminals. And this is all the work that Leonardo da Vinci can get. And to rub it in, all the other big painters in Florence have been invited to the biggest gig of the time, to paint the Sistine Chapel. Leonardo's invite never came. Now here's what I think's really interesting about this. At this low ebb in his life, Leonardo had just turned 30. It's funny, isn't it, how when you're young, you look at 30 like it's some kind of terrible milestone, like if you're not on the right path by now, you're in trouble. And that's when we live twice as long. I mean, imagine how Leonardo felt. For him, 30 was pretty much middle age. Thing is, I could tell you loads of stories like this. At 30, this guy was sweeping the floor in a laboratory for another scientist who today hardly anyone's ever heard of. This guy was a mid-rank soldier with a drinking problem. At 30, he's living with his mum and dad, and this guy's bankrupt. And as for him, well, you know who he is, but did you know that at 30, he'd been trying to make it as an actor for 10 years, but could still only get bit parts on TV, and was working as a carpenter to pay the bills. But look, this isn't just about late starters. I think these stories are trying to tell us something about what it means to be creative and successful today. To see what that is, we need to go from one famous carpenter back to the other one. The Last Supper is a masterpiece, right? Leonardo solved a perspective problem that had confused artists for years just by the way he places Jesus' hands. We can tell who Judas is, not in some obvious way, but in the subtle way he's positioned in the painting. Now, it was also the work that made Leonardo da Vinci. It was his first timeless piece. But here's what's amazing about this. It was finished, wait for it, in 1498. Remember when we left Leonardo painting dead people when he was 30? That was in 1482, 16 years before The Last Supper was finished. In other words, Leonardo da Vinci got his big break when he was 46. That's just how long it takes to get this good at doing something. But it feels like we've forgotten this. You know, these days we're in such a hurry, and I worry we've created a dangerous blind spot in our approach to creativity. But how did that happen, and can we do anything about it? The answer lies with this American TV star and his talking skeleton. So what's the thread that connects history's greatest achievers? Well, actually, it's pretty simple, but it's the complete opposite to how we think today.
I figured it out.
Now I'm going to try and use a late night chat show host to explain what that is. A bit strange, I know. First though, we need to go back to Leonardo da Vinci's story. We left him last time as a washed out 30-year-old in 1482, out of work and out of luck. And then I did something bad. I skipped right over the next 16 years of his life to go straight to his first masterpiece. That's bad because if you want to know what makes a genius, the answer lies here in these years. And it's a story that never gets told. So it's 1482, and Leonardo had just arrived in Milan, leaving the unfortunate days of Florence behind him. He gets a job for this humble-looking guy, the Duke of Milan. Finally, he thought things would start to go his way. Well, actually no. First, there's the story of the lady and the ermine. In 1489, he asks him to paint a picture of her and her pet weasel. Fair enough, but if you look closely, you'll see Leonardo puts far more detail into painting the weasel's face than the girl's, and apparently she wasn't happy. Then there's the curse of the giant horse. About 8 years into his time in Milan, he asks him to create something really epic, a gigantic statue of a horse in bronze. Leonardo goes all out on this. He creates countless studies and sketches, he builds a full-size replica in plaster, he even invents a new kind of casting process to make it happen. Then, at the last minute, the Duke decides he needs bronze cannons more than a massive bronze horse, and the project is cancelled. Months and months of work wasted. It was a time of setback after setback. But Leonardo keeps going. And all the time, every single chance he gets, he's drawing, and studying, and sketching, and writing, and prototyping. And he does this, day in, day out, for 16 years. Everything, the unfinished painting and the unfinished horse, the hanged assassin and the unhappy clients, it all adds up. Pretty much every big achiever in history has this chapter in their story, and somehow we forget it. I call them the difficult years. In his book Mastery, which studies the patterns of history's biggest achievers, Robert Greene calls it a largely self-directed apprenticeship that lasts some 5 to 10 years and receives little attention because it does not contain stories of great achievement or discovery. But they're part of everyone's story. Marie Curie spent 7 years living in poverty in Paris while she studied and researched radioactivity. Michael Faraday worked as a lab assistant for 7 years too, before he was even allowed to do his own experiments. Stephen King wrote every day for 9 years before he even sold his first novel. And John Coltrane practiced the saxophone feverishly every single day for 17 years before he even got his first big hit in 1960. Okay, but what about the child prodigies? You know, Mozart and Tiger Woods. Well, they had their difficult years too. They just started really young.
How old are you, Tiger?
Daddy.
2. 2?
It's as simple as that. Or at least it was. And then something changed.
I figured it out.
Which is where Craig Ferguson comes in. Now, if you don't know who he is, he's a late-night TV show host in the States. And sometimes he can say things that are unexpectedly profound.
In the 1950s,
Late 50s, early 60s, a bunch of advertising guys got together in Madison Avenue and decided that what they were trying to do was sell products to younger people. They thought we should try and sell products to younger people because then they'll buy things their whole lives. It was just an advertising thing. They didn't mean any harm by it. It's just a little bit of market research. And so everybody started targeting the youth because the youth was the place where you were going to be able to sell things. And what happened was that in a strange kind of quirk of fate, youth began to be celebrated by society in a way that it had never been any time in human history. It became fashionable and desirable to be young and to be stupid. And now that's what all the kids want to be.
This celebration of youth, coupled with technology, has distorted our perception of time. The world moves faster and so do our expectations. Today we want success in 17 levels, or 17 minutes, 17 seconds. And when the promise of something new and better is just a click away, who wants to wait 17 years? But that's the thing that connects all of these great people. They played the long game. All of us have the brains and the talent and the creativity to join them. But now, right when it matters, do any of us have the patience? Maybe one of the greatest things about the internet is how much it's leveled the playing field. I mean, we've created a world where anyone with an idea can go out there and tell a story, and the whole world is watching. Yeah. Sometimes, despite all of our hard work, it feels like success is something that happens to other people. You know, whether they earn it or not. It feels like very few of us admit to these low moments in our creative lives, you know, when it feels like we're making art and nobody cares. But we really need to talk about it because it affects almost all of us, and it's ended countless creative careers before they've even begun. Who wants to make art in the dark? Did you know that in Brazil they have these amazing fireflies, big and luminous, crossing and recrossing the night? And not that long ago, women would catch them and, being ever so careful not to kill them, pierce each one with a pin. And then they would fasten them onto their hair and onto their clothes. Living diamonds in the dark. Look, the usual advice for artists is easy to find. Stop making it in the dark. You've got to tweet harder and Facebook faster. Spread the word. But what you're about to see isn't the usual advice. Because this advice comes from one of the least successful artists ever. In a small town in the south of France, he lives and works in obscurity, where, after a long day of working alone, he walks home alone. The locals even cross the street to avoid him. He lives by himself in a small house on the edge of town, in a tiny room he can barely afford, with just a few small possessions. An artist who, in the 9th year of his career, is yet to sell a single painting. Now, I know he's one of the classic examples of the struggling artist cliché, but there's a mystery to Vincent van Gogh, because he's been painting for nearly a decade without an audience. And that's amazing, because I tell you what, over the last 9 years, he's had plenty of chances to pack it all in. One of the first things you have to know about Vincent van Gogh is that he started very late. He was 27 before he picked up a pencil seriously. And let's just say his first attempts weren't exactly encouraging. He knew nothing about anatomy or perspective. His only support came from his younger brother Theo, and we know so much about Vincent's life thanks to the hundreds of letters they wrote to each other. Vincent finds a mentor here who introduces him to oil paints, but any new hope is short-lived. His mentor's completely unimpressed by his work and kicks him out. And now money's becoming a big problem. Theo was sending 100 francs every month, but it barely covered the cost of his paints. Vincent's diet and his health were the first to suffer. So many of his letters now are just about how hungry he is. With the help of a perspective device, his pictures are definitely improving, but then the money runs out again, and at the grand age of 30, Vincent is forced to move back in with Mum and Dad, who, by the way, think he's wasting his life. Vincent's new landscape matches his prospects. He'd been doing this for 3 years now with absolutely no success, and the pressure to give it all up is growing. But instead, he's now working twice as hard, furiously trying to learn how to paint faces. Look at him, just practicing over and over on his own. I don't know, maybe it's ambition that's driving him forward. We know from his letters he dreamed of producing something to match his idols, the renowned Eugène Delacroix and Jules Breton. But you don't need me to tell you that the gap between our idols and ourselves is often painfully large. Another long winter passes through. In the bitter frost, Vincent is hard at work preparing what he always considered to be his first masterpiece. He called it The Potato Eaters. His brother called it, okay, and that was that. Now, just to take stock here, at the age of 31, Vincent is still living in poverty. His teeth are falling out because of his poor diet. the few possessions he does have need a serious upgrade, and he was beginning to face new torments. And through all of this, he's painting for an audience of just one, his brother. Whatever it is that you do, imagine the result of your hard work only ever being seen by a single person and then forgotten. I mean, would you even bother? And this is what's so incredible about this guy. Not only does he keep going, but he's so prolific. We're talking nearly 1,000 oil paintings produced in his short lifetime. He knows something we don't. Alright, so it's time to introduce a word that perhaps you've never heard of before. In 1990, the Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi published a groundbreaking book, Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience. Now, hidden in the book is the word autotelic. It's a combination of two Greek words, auto meaning self, and telos meaning goal. As the professor explains, it refers to a self-contained activity, one that is not done with the expectation of future benefit, but simply because the doing itself is the reward. When the experience is autotelic, the person is paying attention to the activity for its own sake. When it is not, the attention is focused on its consequences. Now, Vincent had probably never heard the word autotelic, but it's pretty obvious that he lived and worked by the idea, because in 1886, after arriving here, Vincent discovers colour. His letters to Theo become full of detailed notes on colour theory, hues, tones, shades, lights and darks. To express the love of two lovers by the marriage of two complementary colours, their blending in their contrast, the mysterious vibrations of related tones, to express hope by some star, someone's passion by the radiance of the setting sun. Of course Vincent never gave up, he was having too much fun. Yes, his life is hard, but he's solving problems he finds fascinating. Vincent's long, steady focus on technique finally pays off. In February of 1890, at the age of 36, he receives a letter from his brother with good news. After 10 long years, he sold a painting. Now, you think there'd be celebration here, vindication, but no. What Vincent does next is as humble as it is remarkable. He gets back to work. And in a letter to Theo, he put it like this. You know, there are fireflies in Brazil that are so luminous that in the evening ladies stick them into their hair with pins. It's very fine fame, but see, it is to the artist what the hairpin is to those insects. You wish to succeed and shine, do you really know what you want? Now, it's important we don't end up romanticising all the difficulties Van Gogh faced. They were real, and in his last years, his internal battles became more violent and more devastating. But even the extremes of Vincent's struggles were tolerable to him, because he loved what he did. Look for them, and you find the autotelic artist everywhere. People who know that it's not up to them to decide whether their next thing is going to be popular or successful. People who know it's only up to them to do their work. You can't control the external outcomes of what you do, so why even think about them? Except, of course, that we've created a world where those external outcomes are valued more than anything else. And that's our challenge today. In a world obsessed with popularity, will we do our work regardless of the consequences? Will we still make our art, even if nobody's watching?